order. We now come to the backbench motion on errors in payments made to victims of the Equitable Life Scandal. Bob Blackman to move.
Thank you very much, Madam Deputy Speaker. And I beg to move the motion on my name and in the name of honourable and right honourable colleagues on the order paper. This debate has actually been delayed since the 26th of March 2020 because of obviously the COVID pandemic. And I would like to thank the Backbench Business Committee for putting this debate on in terms of time, and also the Leader of the House and Mr. Speaker in allowing us to participate virtually in a debate so that we can actually explore these issues in some detail. I declare my interest as co-chairman of the All-Party Parliamentary Group for Justice for Equitable Life Policyholders. Now, I co-chair that with the Honourable Member for Leeds North East, who sadly has a prior commitment and is not able to be with us this afternoon. But our all-party group has 289 members now, almost a majority of the House. So that demonstrates how important this issue is to all of our constituents. Now, I want to set out several things during this debate and frame it appropriately. This case with Equitable Life is absolutely unique. There have been other failures of pension schemes and other failures of financial institutions where, unfortunately, that has happened, and quite rightly, the government has not chosen to bail them out. But this failure was unique. Back in the 1980s, Equitable Life started what can only be described as a Ponzi scheme. And I distance the current Equitable Life board from what was going on in the 1980s. They deliberately set out to create a scheme whereby they were promising bonuses which could not be achieved and could not be sustained in the long term. As a result, over 1 million people invested their money with Equitable Life in the expectations that they were a safe and secure environment in which to hold their money. Now, back in this then led to a position whereby, while the money was coming in, it's all very well, but when the money had to be paid out, and it was going out in such a way that the scheme was recognised as being unsustainable, clearly action had to be taken. The reason why this is unique is, of course, that this was a conspiracy between Equitable Life, the regulator, and the government of the day. This was considered too big to fail, because if it failed, then the government would have to pick up the costs. The scandal went on, so that back in the House of Lords was involved in setting aside the position way back in the year 1999, and then Equitable Life closed to new business in 2000 as a result. Now, 10.5 years ago, I was proud to stand on a manifesto and elected, I think, with my honourable friend at the time, of promising proper and full compensation for the victims of this scam. Basically, people lost their livelihoods and their pension that they all look forward to in their old age. And it should be recognised that Equitable Life victims are typically retired nurses, teachers, civil servants, factory and shop workers, plus small business owners who had no choice following this but to set up a personal pension. The majority of those individuals had less than £20,000 in their pension pot. But in 2010, we promised them proper and full compensation. Neither of those factors have been delivered. Almost 1 million pension savers have received just 22% of their losses. They suffered following maladministration. And it's worth reminding the House that way back in 2008, it was then ruled by the Parliamentary Ombudsman that this was a case, the most severe case of maladministration ever seen, and that the victim's loss was directly attributable to a decade of serious, serial regulatory maladministration. So it's right that we set out to compensate those individuals. Now, so far, the Treasury has refused to disclose the full workings of the calculations of the payments that have been made. That can hardly be considered transparent. Now, in 2010, we promised that victims' losses amounted to 4.3 billion, and they would actually be provided with full compensation. That was later revised to 4.1 billion, but so far only 1.5 billion has been allocated for compensation. The government allocated 620 million to those already receiving an annuity, leaving only 780 million to share amongst the 1 million other victims, plus 100 million contingency. This meant that these pension savers have only received 22.4% of the money they'd lost as a consequence of the decade of failure by the Treasury and the financial regulators. So let's be clear, what also has happened is that for some bizarre reason, which I've never been able to fathom, those people who were classified as being the pre-1992 trapped annuitants, the most vulnerable and the oldest victims of this scam, were excluded from the scheme. Now, it's true that we were able, through lobbying and through the good work of ministers, to ensure that those victims received a one-off payment of £5,000, increased to £10,000 if indeed they were on pension credit. This went some way towards compensating them. The reality is that to compensate the entirety of those individuals would cost no more than £100 million. They're excluded because of the position of them taking out their policy before the 1st of September 1992. Now, what happened between them taking their policies out and the 1st of September 1992 seems bizarre, because the ruling seems to have been that they could not have known that this was a Ponzi scheme. They could not have known about the regulatory failure prior to the 1st of September 1992. Therefore, even though they were in ignorance, they should be excluded. And in my view, that's an injustice that we need to put right. So in addition, what we seek to achieve, Madam Deputy Speaker, is full payment for the 895,000 traced pension saver victims, which would then finally settle the unpaid debt covering their losses, which were incurred through no fault of their own. This would cost 2.6 billion and could be phased over time. We also want equality of treatment for the pre-92 trapped annuitants, and they could easily be met with the underspend that has taken place out of the 1.5 billion already allocated. We also need to see full transparency on the Treasury calculations. There remains serious doubt over the accuracy and reliability of the methodology that has been used by the Treasury to calculate monies owed to qualifying Equitable Life policyholders as part of the compensation scheme, which was established under the Equitable Life Payments Act 2010. The Treasury should disclose full details of how these calculations were made. Now, I've set out in the motion, together with colleagues, that a PAC, a Public Accounts Committee, and PACAC joint inquiry is required into payment accuracy. EMAG, who represent the Equitable Life victims, have uncovered cases where policyholders were significantly undercompensated for their losses due to errors in the Treasury's calculations. Now, in these instances, no attempt was made by the Treasury to contact the policyholders, and cases were only revealed following appeals made to the independent review panel. In all cases of appeal to the independent review panel, the case was upheld, and the independent review panel made recalculations which resulted in increased payments made to the policyholder. So not a single appeal has been failed to be upheld. The most extreme case that has so far been brought to our attention is that of a policyholder whose losses were calculated as £17, £17, when they were actually £8,661. He won on appeal. And so now EMAG is calling for a joint inquiry into the accuracy of the payments made to victims of the scandal. And clearly that's something that we all wish to see, Madam Deputy Speaker. Now, I think it's very clear that under COVID and under the current economic position, we are all living through an immensely challenging and unpredictable period. The virus has had a significant impact on people of all ages, especially the elderly. Many Equitable Life victims are currently confined to their homes, increasingly vulnerable and worried for their futures, making the need for this issue to be settled all the more important. This, after all, is a debt of honour. Equitable Life victims were pushed to one side as a direct consequence of the timing of the 2008 financial crisis, which saw the UK's banking corporations bailed out, while hard-working and responsible pension savers took the hit. The same must not happen again. Equitable Life victims did the right thing, and they saved prudently for their retirement. The government should now do the right thing by them. The current crisis has shown that money can be found when the political will exists. As I've said, this is a debt of honour that must finally be paid. The compensation payments would be spent on shared down the generations, and in doing so will be recycled in the economy, supporting the economic recovery that we all need. So, Madam Deputy Speaker, I thank you for allowing me to introduce this motion. I look forward to the debate that will follow from contributions from members on all sides of the House, and also to my honourable friend on the front bench in answering this debate. I so move.